And so it's now my pleasure to introduce the opening plenary of this afternoon's programme, supported by the Science Business Technology Strategy Board initiative. And it's going to be looking at climate tech. How will we deliver solutions to the world? And with that, I'm delighted to hand straight over to Richard Hudson in Washington, DC, our founder and editor-in-chief, who's going to be leading these discussions with a distinguished panel. Rich, warm welcome. Great to see you again. The floor's yours.
Thank you very much, Simon. Simon, as you just said, this discussion is about climate technology. 35% of the Horizon Europe budget is supposed to be dedicated to climate research and innovation. That's a significant chunk of money. It's even, however, dwarfed by amounts that are proposed, not yet agreed, in Washington and in other capitals of the world. The question is, and the subject of this discussion, great, so we're going to be spending more money on climate technologies. How are we going to share it? How are we going to compete on it? These are fundamental issues of world trade, of equity, of all kinds of other issues. So to have this discussion, I'm delighted to introduce a very international cast of characters. For one, from France, Antoine Petit, the newly reconfirmed CEO, PDG, of CNRS, the Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique, the French National Research Agency. Marieta Graça Carvalho, who was a Portuguese member of the European Parliament and a frequent rapporteur on Horizon Europe and Horizon 2020 and before issues, and also former Portuguese science minister. Riccardo Procacci, who is the CEO of Avio Aero, he is in Italy, and vice president of GE Aviation. I nearly said innovation, Riccardo, which it is as well. And Daan du Toit, he's the Deputy Director General in South Africa for the Department of Science and Innovation there. And lastly, Soete, he's Emeritus Professor and former Rector of Maastricht University in the Netherlands, and very well known in Brussels circles for being chair in the past of just about every expert group that has ever existed in the Commission. So thank you very much all for joining us. Now, to begin this discussion, some of us prepared a white paper that is intended to simply raise the problem and list some of the options that have been discussed for sharing or competing, cooperating or competing in climate technologies. This is, Luc very kindly took the lead in drafting this paper, and you can find this both on the Science Business website and in the platform. And he also contributing to this was Antoine from the CNRS, Graça from the European Parliament, and myself. I should emphasize that this paper is not intended to be a statement of the views of our respective organizations. It's just some thinking we've done together. So, with that preamble, I'm going to invite Luc now to tell us what on earth is this paper about and how do we begin this discussion? Luc, over to you.
Thanks, Rich. Well, let me also thank the organizers for having invited me. And you know, somewhere you had to take the lead to kick off, and you know, when you're retired, this is the best moment to start to kick off with white papers, etc. Because you are free, you are open, you can really reflect on issues which people in work have much less time possibly to reflect on. And so what I really wanted to exchange with my colleagues here around the table are the ideas that we can learn in terms of the debate about how we implement all those new technologies as we develop them in the climate area from the pandemic crisis. Because the pandemic crisis illustrates to some extent some interesting features, for instance, the open science nature of the underlying biomedical research and the way the speed at which the research community addressed the need for vaccines, addressed the whole sequencing of the virus, which was a success recognized across the world, which involved international collaboration amongst all scientists. So the notion of open science at the moment of major crisis, such as the pandemic crisis, is well illustrated in this case. And it shows that really scientists, once they see a major catastrophic event, such as the pandemic, are prepared to collaborate, to exchange data, and to work together. The issue is really more at the technology level. And at the technology level, and in this case, more the health policy area, in broad terms, we saw exactly the opposite. Return to national health policies to look at the figures we had on epidemiological research within national boundaries. And of course, from that perspective, every government is responsible to its citizens and has, of course, its own health policies. And so you saw this enormous divide between an open science and a relatively closed health policy, sometimes for very good reasons, given the different way in which the epidemic was diffused across countries, but nevertheless, with very little interactions between health policy makers, even in areas in communities such as the European Union. What can we learn? Well, we can learn certainly that when confronted with crisis, there is clearly a return to national policy making. And this holds particularly for the climate crisis, that if the climate crisis is to some extent an area with a much longer period, of course, the knowledge behind it is, of course, far well known. It's well known amongst the science community. What are the challenges? The technology areas are also increasingly known. We are, as Rick just explained, the Horizon Europe project, but not just Horizon Europe, also the Next Generation Europe program, the resilience and the RFF funds, etc., are typically also designing a large amount of these resources of restructuring following the pandemic to climate change and to sustainable policies and sustainable technologies. And so the issue here is how can we then, in this framework, move in a more direction of openness, of sharing the knowledge, of exchanging technology without undermining the technological competitiveness, which has always been behind R&D policies. And I think this is the fundamental challenge. And the paper sketches out, as a discussion paper, just to open up, a number of issues, a number of challenges which policymakers will be confronted, and particularly within Europe, we will be confronted with, because solving on our side, for instance, getting towards the Paris Agreement with respect to climate change objectives and aims will not solve the global climate problem. So we will need to make sure that all countries participate, use the technologies, whether they're developed in Europe, in the US, or anywhere else in the world, and that the speed up of using those technologies is fast enough to prevent the climate crisis really to occur in the near future. We make a couple of proposals there, and I invite my colleagues here to highlight those. They are of a general nature, but they are specific in terms of challenging some of the current policies in this area. So without further ado, this is just to introduce the paper. I hope people will look up this discussion paper, which is really to launch debates and to raise issues such as you find them today amongst policymakers about strategic autonomy, about various other issues where you see that countries are trying to re-establish some notions of technological competitiveness, in contrast with precisely this need to spread the knowledge, and in particular to spread the technologies and the implementation of those technologies across the globe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lou. So we didn't do a great job so far on sharing vaccine pandemic-related technologies. How can we do better on climate technologies? That's kind of the theme, the overall. So just any first reactions from my fellow panelists on anything to do with this theme or the paper. Antoine, you just raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to start. Really, I think that we have to emphasize to everybody that global challenges call for global cooperation. We have no choice. It was true from the pandemic, as Luc explained. It's perhaps even true for climate change. In the next year, we will not have a European climate and a Chinese climate and so on. So I think it's really important to set aside our minor disagreements and focus on first few objectives that we should globally aim to reach. And I think that scientific communities have the duty, in some sense, to force politicians to take their responsibilities. Scientists should not be mistaken for political decision makers, but yet they can provide politicians with a set of simple scientific targets to address the challenges of climate change. And scientists should try to push politicians, from my point of view, to take decision based on scientific rationales. And we know that politicians are very sensible to citizens. So also, yes, I think it's our role as scientists to explain to citizens that science will not make miracle, but nevertheless, it's clear that we have helped to understand, in particular through the IPCC work, the reality of the climate change. And we have to push, from my point of view, to solutions, to options, to recommendations. And it's clearly at the global levels that we should do that.
So Antoine, it's a responsibility of scientists to participate and push forward this debate. I mean, the top of the news over here in Washington for the past few days has been a rather car crash connection between science and policy with the resignation of Biden's chief science advisor. It's a very, all around the world, this relationship between scientists and politicians is very difficult. Any suggestion on how it would get better with climate?
Well, I think we first of all, we need confidence, we need trust, we need more exchanges, and we also, and that's also, don't be mistaken about our roles. Sometimes, you know, that scientists would like to take decisions. I think it's not our role. And it's not easy, but we have really to accept that. But our role is clearly to explain what we know, what we don't know, since we have a lot of things that we don't know. But there are a few things that we know. And so we really, from my point of view, we really have to push what we know and to explain this to politicians and also, as I said, to citizens.
Okay, all right. Who else would like another comment on the paper or the framing of the whole thing? Riccardo, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I went to the paper and I found it, to say the least, fascinating. You know, as a former researcher at university and PhD, that's probably what I was dreaming for. Now, fast forwarding to my current time as a manager of a multinational company, I say that. To me, the key message where I totally agree is that we need more collaboration at all levels, both within Europe and probably also more transatlantic collaboration. At the same time, especially when addressing politicians, we can't use slogans. We can't just go after our goals without looking at the complexities of the world we are living in. And when I look at the industry, I'm in the business of building jet engines. There are so many complexities that needs to be taken in consideration to make this to work, this collaboration to work, instead of causing some failing of the overall industry.
And so the collaboration is very difficult then, you say? I mean, when it comes to climate technologies, will it be any different?
It's necessary, but it needs to be, in my view, well thought. Let me start saying that our industries are, our companies are publicly traded companies, so the IP in a way is the value of the company. So sharing that IP could be challenging. No, probably my 6,000 employees would not be very happy if I would say that I would share what they've built over the years to everyone. On the other side, we cannot innovate in isolation. Isolation will never happen in a closed environment. So figuring out how we establish this collaboration, across the industry is going to be of the essence. When I look at what clean aviation is trying to do, I think is moving exactly in the right direction, because it's not necessarily looking at forcing companies to share their IP, but is kind of forcing companies to create an ecosystem of companies that will work together to create the IP. Now, how will be forced to collaborate with, as an engine maker, I'm forced to collaborate with an airframer, will be forced to collaborate with SMEs, okay? All of that will create an ecosystem that today, I believe, doesn't exist, is not very well organized. And that will definitely accelerate the growth of the innovation in our
right. And this is in the clean aviation project that you're talking about. That's part of Horizon Europe, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. So Graça, go over to you. How do you feel about the paper or the ideas?
Thank you very much for the invitation and to be part of this very interesting debate. As I was a rapporteur recently of the partnerships, including the clean aviation, but also the partnerships with the cooperation with Africa in the domain of health. I want to develop a little bit my thoughts on this. But before that, let me comment on the discussion that we had on the science advice. Actually, in Europe, we have a quite well-established system in the European Union, and it's very clear that the role of the scientists, the role of the science advice, and the role of the politicians, and also the role of the ethics for public policies making, that we also have quite well established system in the European Union. So it's quite fortunate that we have been developing these systems along the years, and they work very well, and it's very clear the role of each, and when it is the borders are crossed, there are problems. So each of these will have a different role to play, and a very important role. The scientists, the science advisors, the politicians, and the members of the groups of ethics. And they are all part of this ecosystem, and it was there that produced in the end good public policies. Now on the topic of the paper and the main topic of this debate, I want to draw this parallel between the green tech and the climate tech and the health cooperation. And I want to stress that you have, Richard said in the beginning, we didn't do very well sharing the vaccine. I don't think that we should share the vaccine patent, at least the innovative the mRNA vaccine. I think that we can do better in the capacity building point of view, and that is a very important topic, and it's where we should work and do more. And we know to do this. We have been working with other countries for a long time in capacity building, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of skills, in terms of capacities, institutional capacities to in the area, for example, on health. And we should do the same kind of thing on the area of clean tech. My experience in this area is mainly due to the partnership of the AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis that I was proud to have launched as a minister a long time ago in 2004. I think that Mr. Toit also knows very well. And I was rapporteur of the second, and now shadow on the second, and now rapporteur on the third EDCTP that is now called Global global health. And there we have a strong focus on the capacity building. And actually, we should use the same capacity also for the COVID-19, because, and that is my first concrete recommendation. We are very scattered and fragmented in funds and in programs, and they don't talk to each other. So we have the DCTP, AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis in one side. We have the aid to development that is working as other people inside the commission, as other funds, as other projects that they don't talk to each other. We have the COVID-19 that is also do not exchange information with and the experience of the EDCTP, the AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. We need to be this only inside the European Commission. So, and is even more when we start going to member states and to the recovery and resilience plan, the regional funds, the international cooperation. Of course, member states want to have their sovereignty in some of these policies, like the external dimension and external policy, but we should coordinate more all these efforts.
Okay, let me stop you there for a sec, because I actually want to come to that point altogether. So we will come back on this issue very much. But let me ask you one quick question, and then, because I think Daan might have a few on this also. You were just starting to talk about patent, well, you didn't say the term, but patent waivers and such. And you were saying that capacity building is important. Well, it takes generations to build capacity. It takes 1 minute for a president to order a waiver. So what do we do in a crisis?
Is no point to waiver a vaccine like the present one that is so complex to fabricate, because you will need the capacity to install the factories, to do all the procedures. So it's much better that this is done in agreement with the ones that have the patent in collaboration, and this is already happened. They are already negotiating in other countries, in Senegal and other countries, that together they can do it in different parts of the world to increase the capacity, and this is very, very important. But as it is now, that we are still in the experimental phase, that we still need to develop the vaccines further, that the companies have invested. We also have invested, that's true, public money, but the companies have invested. It's too early to waive the patent of these vaccines. And in principle, I'm not against. In the past, I have been in favor of, in other situations, on the AIDS waiver of the patent. In other cases, it was very beneficial. In this case particular, we are not at the point where we should, that Europe and the European companies should waive the patent.
Okay, all right, we will come back to this issue. It's an important one. Daan, over to you in South Africa. What is your reaction to this issue?
Thank you very much, Rich, and thank you very much for inviting me and having a perspective from the global south and from Africa. 3 short points. In the first instance, Professor Petit rightly said, and I'm sure we all agree with that, global challenges require global responses. You will find that terminology in South African policy documents as you found them in the policy documents for Horizon Europe, etc. And indeed, we agree there's a lot we can learn from the COVID-19 perspective to inform our response to climate change. But a point I wanted to emphasize is it's actually interlinked. We have to solve them together, because for us, the biggest societal challenge of them all is the persistent poverty and the persistent inequality, specifically North-South. And we will not be safe. No one will be safe from future pandemics or address climate change unless we address those issues. And that requires a response from science and innovation. And therefore, this is a very important discussion to add. The second point would be, not only is it an important discussion, but we should have an honest discussion. All our policy documents speak about global challenges. We need to work together, but we also all speak, South Africa, the first, about wanting to be the most competitive knowledge economy in the world and maximize opportunities for our innovation system. So it means we're all competing against each other as well. So we need to have that honest discussion about how we reconcile competition and collaboration. And I just want to use a small example because we spoke about science advice for policy, which is so crucial. So in the beginning of the pandemic, I think we all rightfully celebrated this was a good time for science. Science was prominent, scientists at center stage. But we did see, exactly as Professor Soete and the colleagues in the white paper emphasized, that as time went past, I mean, national interests, national policy priorities started to override the considerations of science. And we saw that very specifically in our case. I mean, we have invested over many years, very proud of advanced capabilities for genomic surveillance. We believed in doing that. We believed in sharing the information as soon as we had. And then we found ourselves stigmatized, I would say perhaps even punished for doing that, with restrictive measures which were not based on scientific advice at all. So I think this is not a complaint session. It's not about that. I think we have to learn about that because science advice is absolutely crucial if we're going to, and using the best science is absolutely going to be crucial if we're going to respond to the challenges of climate change. And then just the third point is it's an important, it's a honest discussion, but it also should be a challenging discussion. So we should challenge ourselves. So I really appreciate the focus in the white paper on North-South collaboration, on ensuring technology diffusion to the South. I don't like to use those words, helping, assisting developing countries. That's all fine. It should be, as Madame Carvalho said, it should always be about capacity building, but we should also challenge ourselves, and this is a challenge to our friends in Europe. I mean, we do really appreciate, and I want to acknowledge the continued strong focus on collaboration with Africa in Horizon Europe, but it should be collaboration which also is open to technology diffusion from the south to the north, because that is actually what global collaboration should be about. It's about drawing collectively on the best talent, the best solutions. We have to make a difference. And truth be told, right now, that's not necessarily the case. It's more about let's diffuse to the south, secure market access. So let's have that conversation about how we're challenging these paradigms. But I think I can say a lot about a patent waiver, but perhaps you'll want us to have a specific discussion.
We'll come back to that issue. But actually, a question just came in from the audience, which is relevant to something that you just said, Daan. The question is, do you really think technology is going to solve the global climate problems? I mean, isn't it going to have to be social innovation that solves it? So for any of you, what about
just to quickly react on that? Definitely technology on its own, of course not. Of course not. And it will not only be people like ourselves on this panel. It has to be without falling into the trap of using policy jargon, it has to be an inclusive conversation. Exactly. It's about social, it's about changing the way of we doing things, the way we organize ourselves, and technology will play a part of that, but that includes a whole of society effort to respond to that. So I would certainly completely agree that there is no a miracle technology solution on its own. That's not what the answer is. But technology will play a crucial role, but we need to understand how to deploy those technologies.
Yeah, Graça, could I just come to you on that point about social innovation? I mean, you know, most of the work in the Parliament on Horizon Europe has been about things, you know, technology, and there are parts of Horizon Europe that deal with social innovation. But is there enough? Is there a suggestion on that?
I would say that the solution is the combination of the technological innovation and social innovation, both. But the research and the technology innovation will play a very important role in the case of clean tech, because we don't have the technologies still that we require to have the transformation. Being in the transport sector, as it was said, the clean aviation is still not there. We are in the way. We are quite well advanced, but still we need a lot of research, innovation, the demonstration, pilot phase and demonstration on many of these areas, and also on the energy production, storage, and all these topics that we still need. But we also need social innovation and also behavior of all of us, each of us. We should probably have a bit more on the social innovation in our research programs. It is something that is, from the point of view of the European programs, quite recently. It started during Horizon 2020. We start talking about former Commissioner Moedas had a big initiative on a conference and studies, but it's still not fully incorporated in the funds, I would say. We still have a way to go on that.
So, all right. So let me come to you to kick off the first round of discussions about specific issues. Now, Graça had mentioned about the lack of coordination between different R&I programs within the European Union. But what about, and this is a question for all of you, what could we do on a global level for coordinating research and innovation? Should there be a global, a horizon world with funding from all governments, with an international governance system and grants thing? I mean, is that what we're coming to for climate? Luc, what do you think about this first?
Well, we have this, of course, in some areas. Think of CERN, ITER, etc., which are associations. At the pure basic science, we do have these kind of collaborations. And I think this is where you can really see that the notion of open science, as Europe has pushed it, as UNESCO has taken it over, as really the agreement also at UNESCO level amongst all countries members of UNESCO. Unfortunately, the US and Israel are not. But apart from that, all countries have really subscribed to this notion of open science. I think that's the first step. The issue is then how do you link this to the point made by Daan, to be honest about technology competitiveness? And I think this is where then you get stuck in, we have our European Green Deal. And in the United States, we have the US Green New Deal. Mm-hmm. And we all, in each region of the world, we will have our Green Deals. And, at a certain level, this is really a pity, because I'm sure there's a lot of collaboration underlying the researchers, both at the scientist and engineer level, to try out pilots in different countries. And how could we learn much more from these different Green Deals in every part of the world, so that we can actually improve the Green Deals or help the Green Deals in other countries or in other regions in the world? This could be a way out. That is, that you exchange everything what comes out of our European Green Deal, out of the US New Deal, New Green Deal, etc., etc. And I think this is where the same with China, with Japan, etc. This could be a way out by which we get much more openness, not just at the science level, but also in terms of the engineering and the implementation of technologies. And then, of course, we enter with who owns these technologies. And that's, of course, the IPR issue, which I happily leave that to Maria and Daan to debate amongst them, how to solve that. But it's much more, of course, than an intellectual property document of a patent waiver. It's the underlying technologies. And, Daan knows this much better than I do. I mean, the Moderna imitation going on in South Africa is supported by all the scientists in the world.
Yes.
And it shows the link between science and technology. And it shows that the scientists are keen on sharing the underlying knowledge when there is a public purpose, a public global purpose.
Okay, but Antoine, may I ask you, should we have a Centre International de la Recherche Climatique?
Well, from a theoretical point of view, I think it could be a good idea, but we have to be pragmatic. And we see that even at the European level, it's always complicated to obtain a political consensus as soon as we start to discuss budget. And so if we wait for an international consensus, unfortunately, it will be too late. So I think we really have to be more pragmatic, and we have, as it has been said, we have to try to develop bilateral, multilateral relation, north-south relation, to probably emphasize on brain circulation, which is also very, very important. In particular, we have to invest on young scientists. And also to come back to one point which was mentioned before, I really think that something that we learned from the COVID pandemic is that we really need transdisciplinary and pluridisciplinary research. That's not just theory to say good words. We need, of course, as you said, we need social innovation too. And clearly we need both. We need technical innovation, social innovations, but also we need to discuss why people will accept or not some innovation. We see that every day with vaccine. In some sense, as scientists, we could say that people are not rational, but they are as they are, and we cannot. It's not an appropriate answer to say that. We have to really to invest on social sciences from the very beginning. And can we do it at the international level? From my point of view, it's just impossible from a pragmatic point of view. And so probably we have to develop concurrent and cooperative actions and to really, I think the IPCC work has clearly shown how some scientists succeed in convincing people and without any formal international organization. So we can do that. I think that a main difference between CERN and ITER mentioned by Luc is that in some sense, climate research is not enough expensive. When you have one, you can have only one CERN on one ITER at the international level. For research for climate change is not, of course, it's expensive at the end, but it's a lot of small amounts of money, if I can say, and there is no unique place where you will put all the research on climate, and that's probably a difficulty to have an international consensus.
Okay, all right, Riccardo, can I come to you? So that's we've just been talking about international research cooperation, but of course the much more difficult problem is cooperation versus competition in technologies. That's where the interests of each country and each company get much more complicated. So just to begin with, I wonder, in your particular industry, it's a very complex chain of relations between final customer, beginning supplier, and the whole chain of it. So if one is talking about various mechanisms to force technology to be changed, I mean, how would it possibly work in your sector?
Listen, I would start saying that if we had, let's start with university. If we had universities that were encouraged to collaborate and cooperate on big streams of research at a European level, making sure that the funding available to them is in a way coordinated and that they could offer readily available to the industry science or basic research at a higher level of maturity than what is typically available today, to the point that individual companies could make it more convenient to access this kind of open shared science instead of developing it in-house. I mean, that would be a breakthrough, because it's typically the development of the underlying we call it technology at a lower level of readiness that absorbs most of the time. Mm-hmm. We talked today about the next generation engine. We start today to develop the underlying technology to have a product that maybe or possibly will fly 2035. Is some of the underlying technology through a better coordinated network of universities was already available or was coming available quickly because universities are cooperating among themselves? That would be a great advancement, because at that point, private company would take that technology and make their own IP and investment on developing the products on top of that technology. And that would be in my view, super efficient. So I think there is the way what I'm describing is a way of accelerating development of technologies without reinventing, if you will, the old capitalist system. Okay, where industries have to compete to win in the market.
So a new way of organizing this,
especially the early part of the technology development. Whatever we do today in the university, think about this. We had, as a company, we had to kind of create a system that would force 27 Italian universities and some of the European universities to collaborate on streams of research that we think are of the essence for the next generation engines. They would not normally do it. So no, there is a level of push that we can have on the universities. If we had a European policy, I mean, I'm not going to global. If you had a European policy that was really making that kind of collaboration a necessity for university in the way, in order to access to important funding, that will make a lot of difference, I believe.
Okay, well, that's one of the proposals that's been kicking around internationally is that there is, although in Europe, because of Horizon, there are agreed systems for handling intellectual property of pre-competitive research, there are no global agreements on doing that. And perhaps that's what would be needed. Would it make a difference to the aviation industry, for instance, if you knew that you supplying to one airline, aircraft maker, could work with another supplier and another aircraft maker and not lose your rights along the way? Would that make a difference in cooperation?
I don't know. Honestly, from where I see it, difficult to conceive at this point. What I know is that when there is a clear objective, it's easy to agree to a single project among companies that are competing every other day of the week. Now, my arch competitor, Rolls-Royce, which is also a super great partner on certain projects. Well, one day we compete and one day we are partners as soon as we find the need or the right opportunity.
Okay, all right. Well, on this issue of the sharing of technology, Daan, I've been fascinated. Again, this is going back to the COVID comparison, by what a South African company has been doing in basically copying the Moderna vaccine. Legally, it appears, or at least Moderna is not challenging it. So could you imagine something like that happening with climate technologies? That there is a way, simply through open science, that the information is available and you can just use it?
I think that the simple answer, Richard, is not only can I imagine it, but if we're not able to do that, I'm not sure we're going to achieve the outcomes we want. Because it is exactly, and it's building on the points Madame Carvalho made. It's about how do we build capacity for the greater good at all, in collaboration. I mean, the initiative you referred to is a partnership which involves the World Health Organization. In fact, we have Dr. Tedros visiting us later this week to see the facilities with support from several partners, including in Europe. And it's all about building that long-term sustainability capabilities for Africa to be part of the global supply chain for vaccines in Africa. And it's comprehensive. It covers human capabilities. It covers the scientific research capability. It's about making sure we have the regulatory and other frameworks in place. So we speak a lot about open science. We all celebrated last year the adoption of the UNESCO recommendation on open science, and rightfully so. But if we're going to put it in practice, these are the type of initiatives we need. And perhaps if you permit me, just a quick point on the patent waiver, which is separate from this discussion, as you say, but it's sometimes I find that we want to put in opposition innovation versus the patent waiver. In South Africa has actively, since the start with India, since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, championed within the WTO the proposal for a patent waiver. And we do so at the same time being fully committed to the role of intellectual property in protecting and stimulating and rewarding innovation. So we don't think it's a contradiction, but it's about to make the link with your earlier discussion. It's about where do we have these discussions on all these governance and regulatory aspects of global science and technology. I mean, we are very committed to work within the multilateral systems, the organizations we have. But I think we perhaps need to reflect for the 21st century, for these challenges, the breakthroughs in technologies, at a global level, what are the governance frameworks we need? So I think the paper, and I want to congratulate Professor Soete and the office, certainly goes in the right direction to stimulate our thinking in that regard.
Okay, a last question for all of you. We can talk in theory about all of these possibilities, but in fact, we know that the political direction has been to increasingly put up walls. So, I mean, strategic autonomy is the term for it in the European Union. And we've just seen the passage of the CHIPS, well, not the passage, the proposal of the CHIPS Act in the EU. We see a similar measure going through in the US. We're talking about the need to cooperate, but what is the reality at the moment? Are we moving in the right direction? Is there a way to balance these? Any of you?
Well, I can start. I think in the aviation industry, we talk a lot about strategic autonomy, both in the commercial engines, also in the defense sector. And I keep seeing a very fine line that we walk between strategic autonomy and protectionism. And more I find myself participating to debates where I see companies, even very important companies, arguing about creation of national European champions, about things that are very, very close to very direct and protectionist measures. So on one side, I say that it is important for a country like Europe, and I use the word country for Europe. I don't know if that is a reality, but definitely it's my dream. Okay, to invest in groundbreaking technologies that are unique and that will define our future. At the same time, we got to make sure we remember why we do so. That is to be able to contribute more in global cooperation. On one side is being part of a transatlantic pact, alliance on technology, products, or whatever, and being able to just contribute with manpower of basic engineering. And the well different is to be part of a global agreement like that and being able to contribute with groundbreaking technology that make the overall program or the overall project better and more significant. So it's an important concept not to be protected for how it is important from anything that resembles to protectionism.
Okay, all right, okay. One last comment from Graça. Do you have a point on this, on this issue of strategic autonomy? And then I think we're out of time. Go ahead.
We are at a point with a very fine, as it was said, a very fine frontier between strategic autonomy and protectionism, and we should avoid. We all have this responsibility to avoid, at least in my opinion, the protectionism. And I think that one of the points that we should emphasize is that we should cooperate at a global level, and especially on the more fundamental research and on the basis to develop technology, like we have been discussing with the US counterpart in the framework of the US-EU Trade and Technology Agreement, on the importance of cooperate on the standards, on the cybersecurity, access to ICT, and data governance. So if we create a common basis, start with a very important point of the standards, that will be a very good principle for collaboration, that we don't go in completely different ways.
Okay, so standardization. Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much all. We're out of time now. For those of you watching, if you'd like to think more about this, look at our white paper, which is online, and don't hesitate to email us and give us your own views on these topics. We will be coming back to this issue again and again. Thank you very much to the panelists. And Simon, over to you.
Rich, thanks ever so much, and also to the members of the Technology Strategy Board who've enlightened such a rich set of discussions on climate tech this afternoon. A quick reminder to online viewers, if you want to know more about the Technology Strategy Board or our other expert initiatives on AI and data governance and future-proofing medicines, please feel free to visit the focus areas section of our website, or if you're on the virtual event platform, pop into the exhibition hall and look in the booths to get more information. Now, our next session will be beginning at 4:30 sharp, but as a bridge into the discussions about the EU-US transatlantic partnership, we have two more videos from leaders of members of the Science Business Network reflecting on how Horizon might change the world and some of the biggest scientific challenges that it needs to address in the years to come. So we'll be hearing from Kimmo Koski, Chief Executive of CSC IT Centre for Science in Finland, and Wojciech Kamieniecki, the Director of the National Centre for Research and Development in Poland. So enjoy the videos, and we'll see you back here in about 5 minutes' time. Thank you.
One of the greatest challenges for science to solve during this decade is obviously climate change. There are a lot of different research activities addressing climate change, but one concrete way to address it is to create a digital twin of the Earth for simulating various natural phenomena and related human activities. Such a digital twin is already being planned in the framework of Destination Earth project. Digital twins, as also other research activities when using computing power or data management resources, they also themselves use a lot of energy. That's one of the reasons why it's necessary to strengthen the European competencies to invest in research infrastructures that are both powerful and sustainable, such as LUMI. To get the most impact of our research infrastructures, Europe needs to build interoperable cross-border ecosystems, converging the high-performance computing data, networks, and expertise. Such ecosystem will boost European collaboration, drive excellence, build European competencies on this topic, and help solve great societal challenges, including but not limited to climate change.
Ladies and gentlemen, modern times pose a number of technological challenges. An attempt to specialize in everything is doomed to fail. It is then necessary to address the fundamental challenges for the development of economies and societies. Artificial intelligence and climate adaptation are certainly among such areas. When supporting the development of AI, the EU is guided by key values: technological credibility and excellence while safeguarding citizens' safety. The National Centre for Research and Development in Poland is part of this trend with its dedicated programs and ideas, newly established Research and Innovation Centre in the field of AI and digital economy. When it comes to climate, the EU, with its Green Deal policy, is the undisputed global leader. NCBR widely implements this task. Apart from the energy and fuel-related threats, also those related to circular economy, water management and clear air are being developed. NCBR supports the development of technologies that serve also ordinary people, such as energy-efficient construction, domestic water retention systems, or ventilation in apartments and schools. NCBR uses its own innovative procurement strategy, Innovation Supper, which was recognized with the European Innovation Procurement Award by the European Innovation Council. To conclude, I am proud that NCBR attempts to tackle digital and climate technological challenges with a broad spectrum of innovative programs.